Right now, you are reading. You have already read thousands of words today. A label on a jar, a name on a screen, a number on a receipt. You did not decide to read any of them. Your eyes landed and the meaning was just there before you could stop it. But for almost all of human history, nothing on Earth could do that. For roughly 200,000 years, every single thing a human being knew lived in one place, inside a skull. And when that skull stopped working, it all went with it. Every recipe, every route to water, every debt owed, every name. A person died and a library. Then, about 5,000 years ago, in one hot river valley, that stopped being true. So why? Why did people finally start pressing marks into clay? Ask most people and you get an answer fast. They will say, writing was born from something beautiful. A poem, a prayer, a law, something a human being was desperate to keep. And here's the thing, every one of those answers is wrong. The truth is smaller, uglier, and far more interesting. But before we get there, we have to bury the three stories you already believe. The first story is the best one. Writing was invented to save our story. Someone had a tale too good to lose, so they carved it down. It's a lovely idea. The clay says no. At Uruk in southern Iraq, archaeologists pulled thousands of the oldest known tablets out of the ground, dating to roughly 5,300 years ago. Not one of them is a story. There is no hero. There is no god doing anything. There is no sentence. Most of them do not even have a verb. The oldest surviving literature in the world, the Sumerian texts found at Abu Salabik and at Farah, arrives around 700 years later. Think about that for a second. Writing existed for 7 centuries before anybody used it to tell a story. 700 years of silence. The second story sounds more serious. Writing was invented by priests. Sacred knowledge, hidden names, instructions for the gods, and the location fits perfectly. The oldest tablets at Uruk come out of the Eanna precinct, the temple district at the center of the city. So the priests did it, except here's where it gets interesting. Go and read what those temple tablets actually say. They say barley, they say beer, they say sheep and cloth, and how many days a man worked. One tablet counts out rations. Another counts jars. The temple was not a place of mystery. It was a warehouse with a staff. Now put yourself in that courtyard. Grain dust in your throat, donkeys braying, 100 sacks stacked to the wall. Nobody in that yard is talking to a god. They are counting. The third story is the one taught in schools. Writing was invented for power. A king wanted laws or wanted his conquests remembered forever. And this one is off by more than 1,000 years. The famous law code of Hammurabi, carved onto a black stone pillar now sitting in the Louvre, was written around 3,800 years ago. The Uruk tablets are older than that by roughly 15 centuries. Kings bragging in stone show up late too. Now here's the part nobody talks about. The very oldest tablets do not name a king even one. What they do name is a person called Kushim, who signs off on shipments of barley for beer, on tablet after tablet. We do not know if Kushim was a person or a title. Either way, he was an accountant. So here's the real answer. Writing was not invented to say something. It was invented to remember a number. Around 5,500 years ago, Uruk was doing something no place on Earth had done before. It was packing tens of thousands of people inside one wall. And a city that size runs on a problem nobody had ever faced. In a village of 80 people, you know every debt in your head. You know who borrowed the goat. You know who still owes you a day of harvest. Your memory is the ledger, and everybody's memory checks everybody else. Now stretch that to 20,000 strangers. It collapses. The temple hands out barley to hundreds of workers, takes in wool from herders in the hills, lends seed grain in spring, and expects it back in autumn. Nobody can hold that. So what do? You build a memory outside your head. And here's where the story turns. In 1992, an archaeologist named Denise Schmant-Besserat published a book arguing that the answer had been sitting in museum drawers for a century. Tiny clay shapes, cones, spheres, discs, little tetrahedrons scattered across the Near East for thousands of years. Nobody knew what they were. She argued they were countered. One cone, one measure of grain, one disc, one sheep. To send a shipment, you sealed the counters inside a hollow clay ball, so the man at the other end could not cheat. But then you could not see inside either. So before sealing it, people pressed the tokens into the wet outside of the ball. The surface now showed what the inside held. And somebody looked at that ball and realized the marks were doing all the work. So they threw away the tokens and flattened the ball. That flattened ball is a tablet. And once that existed, it did not stay in one valley. Writing was invented from scratch at least 3 separate times by people who had never met. Mesopotamia first, then China, where the oldest known Chinese writing was scratched onto ox shoulder blades and turtle shells at Anyang roughly 3,200 years ago. Then Mesoamerica, more than half a world away, with no contact at all. And here's what makes this uncomfortable. The Chinese oracle bones are not poems either. They are questions about harvest, about rain, about whether a birth will go well, with the answers recorded afterward. Different continent, different century, same instinct. Track it. Then look at the letter A. Follow it backwards through Latin, through Greek alpha, back back to a Phoenician sign called Aleph. Aleph meant ox. Turn a capital A upside down and you can still see it. 2 horns, a snout, a head. The most abstract system humans ever built is still wearing the face of a farm animal, because that is what we were counting when we started. So here's the full picture. Writing did not come from a poet. It did not come from a priest. It did not come from a king. It came from a city too big to trust its own memory. It came from clay pebbles in a sealed ball. It came from a man named Kushim, counting barley for beer. And now, look at you. You are surrounded by it and you do not see any of it. Words on your wall, words on the box in your kitchen, words on the screen in your hand, arriving from a stranger 1,000 miles away, and you read them without effort, without thinking, without once feeling amazed. 5,000 years ago, the smartest people alive could not send a single sentence across a river. Now you carry a rectangle that holds more written language than every scribe in Uruk produced in 1,000 years, and you use it to check the time. Every book, every love letter, every contract, every lie ever written down began as somebody trying not to lose count of the sheep. We built eternity out of a receipt. So the first writing was a way to count, but that answer hides a bigger one. Somebody had already invented counting long before clay, long before cities, long before anyone in Uruk owed anyone barley. And here's the thing, we can prove it. In Border Cave, in the Lubombo Mountains between South Africa and Eswatini, a small piece of baboon leg bone was found with 29 notches cut into its edge. It is roughly 43,000 years old. 29 marks made one at a time by someone who is not counting sheep. So what were they counting? Nobody can be certain. But look up, the moon takes about 29 days to go from a thin sliver to a full disk and back to nothing. 29, the same number. And this is where it gets genuinely strange. Strip away every clock, every screen, and every number you have ever been handed, and you still have to answer the most ordinary question there is. What day is it? No phone, no paper, no word for the month. Just a sky, a bone, and a memory that has to hold. People solved it. They solved it 4 different ways, and every single answer was already hanging above them or lying at their feet. One of those answers is a field in Scotland with 12 pits dug in a careful art, thousands of years before the first written word. So before you go, watch that one next. It is on the screen right now, because the tablet in Uruk was never the beginning. It was somebody finally writing down a thing our species had already been doing for 40,000 years.